Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to our random review. Today's random review is 1968's The Day of the Owl, or Mafia, or Il Giorno della Civetta. This is directed by Damiano Damiani, and this is the first film that I have watched from Radiance's relatively brand new Cosa Nostra. 3 films by Damiani starring Franco Nero. It's in this lovely nice hard box, and this is numbers 14, 15 and 16. And we have The Day of the Owl, The Case is Closed, Forget It, and How to Kill a Judge. Very Italian titles, of course. As I say, I've only watched one of them, so I have yet to watch The Case is Closed, Forget It, and How to Kill a Judge. And you get this stunning big thick booklet. Well, it's not really a booklet, it is actually a book, which is fabulous. But we'll talk about The Day of the Owl, because it is quite special. Again, there's the alternate artwork of Mafia. There's J Cobb giving the old devil horns to ward off evil spirits before it was adopted, used by Ronnie James Dio for the universal sign of metal. This co-stars J Cobb, who one of the many American actors who went to Italy in the late 60s and 70s and made lots of crime films. And also the wonderful Claudia Cardinale. This is 1968, so Once Upon a Time in the West would come out in the same year for her. It was shot by Tonino Della Colli, who shot most of Sergio Leone's films, and he also shot Pasolini films, including Salo. It's based on a novel by Chiasa, the Sicilian writer who Fernando De Leo did. A few of his films are based on Chiasa stories or books themselves. This is more in the Elio Petri, Francesco Rossi kind of vein of political crime films. Apart from the opening, there's pretty much no shooty bang bang. This is 1968, so it's kind of before the 70s, strangely enough, before the Years of Lead films really took off and the action crime films really took off. So this is more of a cerebral approach to small town corruption in Sicily by the mafia, led by J Cobb. So the film opens with a very magnum force Dirty Harry sequel opening of somebody in the shrubbery in the countryside loading up a shotgun and shooting a lorry driver, and then as he crawls out of the cab covered in cement and blood, the gunman shoots him dead by the side of the road. His body is found, and the investigation by Franco Nero's Cabinieri begins. It is odd. Franco Nero looks rather young. He has no facial hair in this film, so no moustache and no beard, no stubble, like in his seminal 1966 film Django. He does look very young without facial hair. And he is coming from the north to investigate the South. And as I have learned over the last 2-3 years with Italian cinema, just about every film has a North versus South kind of subtext going on. So we're in the world of construction sites, and there's a new road, and strangely enough, all the kind of contracts tend to go to the people that the mafia want them to go to, and people who stand in their way turn up dead. We also have Claudia Cardinale, whose husband went out to see what was going on, and he seems to have disappeared. So Claudia Cardinale, strangely enough, is upset because she's just left with her daughter to look after. But of course, when Franco Nero tries to ask anybody what's going on and who did it, there's the usual stone wall of silence. Now, obviously, J Cobb, in a film that is about kind of not naming names, obviously he did name names during McCarthyism and during the witch hunts. I mean, now he did it behind closed doors. He didn't do it in an open forum that some others did, but he still named names, and that kind of lingered over him. Obviously, he did On the Waterfront with Elia Kazan, which some people see as a kind of a rationale of naming names. But obviously Elia Kazan, for example, never really was forgotten for that. I remember at the Oscars when he was honoured, back when I watched the Oscars, there were certain people who didn't stand up and didn't applaud him. So J Cobb has that baggage, and of course it is a film about whether people name names or not, and the consequences of that. But as J Cobb said, his wife was ill and kind of struggling with the pressure that he was under to name names and being blacklisted. So that kind of led him to actually name names. So Nero is coming from this as an outsider, as I say, from the north. He obviously gets help from his sidekick, who's a nice little character. He also has an informer who kind of works both sides. He kind of bounces between Franco Nero and J Cobb. And the whole film just has that, it's before the years of lead, but it still has that 70s feel, even though it's a lot of sunshine and there's beautiful countryside. But it's that kind of unspoken, just inbred corruption. J Cobb's character and his cronies kind of have an apartment that overlooks the town square or the village square, so they can sit on high, essentially, like kings on a balcony looking down on their minions, and they manage to see what's going on. There's kind of some fun between Franco Nero, who's got binoculars and kind of looks to see what J Cobb and his sidekicks are up to, including eating little pots of ice cream. At one point, J Cobb says he hates binoculars, but then later in the film he has his own set of binoculars to peer into Franco Nero's office. But there is actually a kind of respect that Cobb has for Nero. He kind of calls him kind of born police. And there's a wonderfully written scene where J Cobb describes the 5 types of men, which I won't tell you about. You can watch the film to find out what they are. But it's a really good scene. And it does have a kind of realistic 70s ending. So there's no car chases and kind of hails of bullets that we would see in the 70s. As I say, it's a much more kind of Petrie Rossi type film, which is probably why I think it's so fantastic. Cardinale's wonderful, because that Cardinale stare when she's really pissed off works very well. There's a great scene with her later on in the film when she's out in the countryside. She's been kind of summoned to the mafioso head as they're having not a picnic, but they're having a meal outside, like on a balcony, and just these kind of sleazy, not very attractive men, telling her what to do and what she shouldn't have done, and it's just, you do really want her to go ballistic and shoot them all, but that's not that kind of film. Well, say the extras on this are absolutely wonderful. I mean, again, I don't know whether Radiance will release these films separately, but I don't know how quickly the box set will sell out. I've got a feeling it will sell out quite quickly. The extras, it's a 2K restoration. There's a new interview with Franco Nero from 2022, which is 17 minutes long, and it's absolutely hilarious. Franco Nero is just an international treasure. In the stories he tells, I don't know whether he has written a book, but he really should write a book, because his stories are absolutely hilarious. There's a 2006 archival interview with Franco Nero and the writer and production manager, which is 27 minutes long. There's an identity crime sis, which is a pun that almost works. Filmmaker and Italian crime expert Mike Malloy, who you might have seen in other Italian releases, maybe in Shameless or some Arrow, I think he's done. He's an American with a moustache. That'll kind of narrow it down. He discusses the Day of the Owl in context of the formation of the Italian crime genre series. That's 20 minutes from 2022, and that's fantastic because he kind of splits the Italian crime films into 3 separate sections: the star-driven, the action, and the kind of highbrow, or the Petrie Rossi model, essentially. Then we have Casting Cobb, which is just an absolutely beautiful 33-minute piece from 2023, where filmmaker Howard B. Burger looks at J Cobb's career in Hollywood, on stage, and in film, including his late work in Italy. Talks about his blacklisting, and that's probably the best piece on J Cobb I've ever seen. J Cobb at times makes George C. Scott, who I'm not a big fan of, it makes him look subtle, but it's a really wonderful extra for 33 minutes, because again, everybody's got reasons for what they do, and that's just a wonderful piece. There's an archival interview with Claudia Cardinale from Belgian TV, where it obviously the driver / guest has actors and directors and stuff in the back of a taxi driving around Belgium. So that's 22 minutes long, and that's a wonderful interview with Cardinale as well. There's a trailer and new subtitles. I should say there's actually the English version, or the English dub version of the film, which is 103 minutes, and the Italian version of the film, which is 109 minutes. I watched the 109-minute version, so J Cobb is dubbed into Italian, but I will probably watch the US version or the English language version as well, because I'll be watching it quite often because it's just so good. Again, Nero's fantastic in it as a man who's trying to make headway, but obviously not a lot of people are giving him any help. It takes a lot, but then very much like Dirty Harry 3 years later, he is prepared to bend some rules and cross some lines to try and get what he's after. Cardinale's fantastic as this woman who's trying to find her husband, and at one point, you know, the town kind of ignores her and picks on her, and there's rumours about her. She has to stand up to that. And again, J Cobb gives a very good performance as well, especially in the scenes later in the film where he actually has some respect for Franco Nero. You know, especially there's a great scene in the balcony where one of his cohorts kind of says all cops are idiots, and he kind of snaps back quite angrily. That's nonsense, because some of them are, you know, men, some of them are born police like Franco Nero. So there's a lot of great stuff in the film. There's a couple of familiar faces if you've watched kind of European cinema of that time, and it's just an absolute joy. It's got a great score as well, not by Ennio Morricone this time. Again, you've got kind of 3 examples of the artwork, and also the inner one with the mafia. So can't wait to watch the other 2 Damiani films, because this one's quite fantastic, and I would highly recommend the box set, even though I've only seen 1 out of the 3 films. But if the other 2 are as good as this, holy cow, Radiance have started off with a bang for their first box set. So long may the Italian cinema come from Radiance. And they announced last week that they're also got a multi-year, multi-title deal with Raro Video. So I'm excited about that as well, because Raro Video have quite a lot of Italian films in their American releases, but apparently they are going to work together with Radiance, so it will look like a Radiance release rather than a Raro Video. Because I mean, I've got Francesco Rossi's amazing World War I film many wars ago, so hopefully Radiance will have a release of that. Pietrangeli's Adua and Friends with Simone Signoret, which I did a random review of, about 4 prostitutes who want to retire and open a restaurant in the country, with Marcello Mastroianni's in that as well, and that's absolutely fabulous. There's, because they actually have The Working Class Go to Heaven on DVD, which I have before. I was obviously really happy that Radiance released that in a Blu-ray. So that's exciting to me, at least, that Radiance and Raro Video are joining forces. Radiance, for a new kid in the block, they are making some very interesting moves, and hopefully the Italian releases keep coming, because again, there's just so much Italian cinema that's untapped, the same way there's still so many Japanese directors, so many French directors. It's funny, there's a Hollywood actor and writer strike on at the moment, and I kept saying to myself, you know, if mainstream Hollywood was to never make another film, it's like I certainly wouldn't be that bothered, when there's so many great films from the past and from other countries to discover and continue to discover, and certainly over the last couple of years there's some Italian films that are just all-time favourites for me now, and they're just so good on so many different levels. The Day of the Owl, not quite sure why it's called Day of the Owl, is certainly one of those. So please let me know if you've seen Day of the Owl, or if you bought the Costa Nostra set with Franco Nero, and let me know what you think of it. And hopefully you'll join me again for more random reviews. And who knows, the other 2 films in the set might feature in random reviews themselves. This is Solitude Ronin from Solitude Ronin Films, saying arrivederci.